would have something to drink while we're working, but that's okay. So yeah, we are going to be making a tincture today. So we'll be looking at kind of the concepts we'll be working with today are making a tincture from a fresh plant, how and why you'd want to do that, and then working with mugwort, and then looking at mugwort versus, so California mugwort, which is what we have here, which is Artemisia douglassiana. So this is the plant that we're working with today. Or California mugwort. Now, generally, when people are talking about mugworts, we are generally discussing European mugwort. That's the kind of the default mugwort, and that is Artemisia vulgaris. And that's been introduced into the United States, and it's pretty common. There are a lot of other species of mugwort. So there are some mugworts that are cultivated to be more of a vegetable. There's a Korean mugwort that's used quite a lot in soups and in cooking. And when you taste it as a fresh plant, if you taste a leaf, you'll think, oh, it's a green. It's a really lovely green. I'll give you two a leaf of this. So, what sometimes people will see a recipe for one mugwort and they'll think, oh, I can substitute another mugwort, and particularly if they're here, they'll think, oh, well, I'm going to substitute our native mugwort. And why wouldn't you want to do that if you're getting receiving a recipe or a concept and you've got this mugwort growing right here? It's reasonable to assume that mugwort is mugwort, and we can just substitute one for the other. And sometimes you can. So there's sometimes when we're looking at a plant that we can say, well, pretty much anything in the genus. So when we're talking about plants, we have the genus name and then the species and then the common name, right? So this plant's common name is mugwort, specifically California mugwort, but there are a lot of different mugworts. And so if we go to the species name, Artemisia specifically douglassiana versus vulgaris versus many of the other mugworts, we will see some differences, difference in strength, not so much in action. The action is going to be the same. It's just the strength is the same, is different. So here's a leaf. This is what smells in here. So that's one of the first things that I want you to do is, so we're going to do our organoleptic testing. It's good you're all sitting down. And if you have mugwort growing around you, so in other areas, in most other parts of the United States, the mugwort that grows there is the Artemisia vulgaris. It is a very common wild plant. But it doesn't grow here because here, this is the plant that kind of hangs around in this territory. We can grow vulgaris here, but it doesn't love growing here because it's just a little too hot and dry. Whereas this is the plant that has evolved to be in this region. So that's why California mugwort is our dominant mugwort. Hi, Teresa. Hi. So Teresa, you have mugwort growing around you. You have the Artemisia vulgaris. If so, then I want you to do this. So when we're smelling plants, this is my smelling class. This is a very important part. When we're smelling plants, oftentimes when we're smelling as humans, we generally tend to go, oh yes, I get the smell of this. And with a plant that is aromatic like this one is, that does give you quite a lot, but it doesn't give you all of the medicine of the plant because some of the plants are very small molecules that are very, very volatile. And so when you smell them, and they're held in glands, they're on the surface of the leaf, right? So the leaf will have little oil glands on the surface that are crushed. That's why when you rub things, they'll become more aromatic or breaking open those oil glands. But there's also chemistry of the plant held in the cell wall. And those cell walls are still entire. Even if you're rubbing it, you're not breaking open the cell walls. So really, to get a sense of what something smells like, we want to crush those cell walls. We want to break all of those volatiles. We want to make everything volatile that can be volatilized, and maybe even volatilize some things that aren't generally volatile. So with that in mind, when we're smelling something, what we want to do, we want to close our eyes so that we're minimizing kind of sensory input, right? We want to focus on our nose. We're going to break the cell walls and then breathe out. When we breathe out from our nose, we have warm, moist air. And that warmth and moisture increases the volatility of aromatic compounds. So just like when you put a plant into a steam, right? We steam plants to get more of those fragrances out. So we're going to breathe out through our nose and then breathe in and break those cells. And it can look pretty silly, but know what? I'm looking at you, but I will have my eyes closed. But I'll also show you what it looks like because it is kind of silly. But I learned this from Lisa Ganora, who's an herbalist in Colorado. I think I've talked to you about her book, because her book is amazing. And so closing your eyes, and we're going to crush and breathe out and go. And then breathe in very, very deeply. And if you do that, you get a much, much stronger sense of the aromatics of the plant. Okay, I am totally looking at you and you look very silly.
It's like such an experience.
Isn't it? I mean, you're also getting an oxygen hit, right? You're getting that, what's the word that I'm looking at? You're getting... what is that? You have the vulgaris. I'm guessing, Teresa, that the vulgaris is the one. Ruth, yeah, absolutely. If you're in Long Beach or nearby Long Beach, you can come and sit in here with us. But you can also join us this way, whichever way you prefer. So, but wherever you are, if you have a mugwort around you, do that. And I wish I had some of the vulgaris here to give you also and compare that to you. But how did that feel? What kind of... What was brought up for you when you did that inhalation?
It's a little bit spicier than I smelled initially.
Yes.
It had kind of like a floral, soft scent, but then it has like a spiciness to it.
Right. Yeah, so that floral soft scent, those tiny little delicate molecules were there, but yeah, when you crush that and you can get that kind of deeper, more intense fragrance. Yeah, absolutely.
It almost has a soapy, does it have saponins?
Almost a soapy plant. It doesn't have many saponins, no,
It has
but
like a sweet smell.
yeah.
More like a mint smell.
Like a mint smell, yeah. So it has, many people will say it smells like a sage, right? And sage and mint are in the mint family. Think of the different plants that are in that family, thyme and lavender, a little bit sort of lavendery, right? It has the fragrance of the Lamiaceae family. And a related plant, another one of our natives is Artemisia californica, which is California sagebrush. So the Artemisias, generally, you'll see them divided into a couple of different categories. There are Artemisias that are the mugworts, and then there's the Artemisias that are the sagebrushes, and then the Artemisias that are the wormwoods. And they all have kind of different places that they land, and within those categories there's a lot of different species of plants that are called either a sagebrush or a wormwood or a mugwort, but they're all the Artemisias, and they all have roughly the same chemistry, just in different ratios. So some of them are used much more as purgatives, as anthelmintics, things to kill off parasites, hence the name wormwood, right? And some of them are much more aromatic, so they have that the sagebrush names. And then the mugworts generally tend to be less aromatic, and they are often much more used internally, except for this one. So we have a lot of those aromatic compounds. Now, one of the things that you're smelling, and it is that kind of deeper, more almost a pine tree-like smell to it, pine tree sage smell. One of the things that you just breathed in is a compound called thujone, and this is the compound of concern when we're working with this plant. So all of the Artemisias have varying amounts of thujone. Thujone is also found in cedars, the thuja, and many conifers. In sage, all of the salvias also have thujone. It is that kind of sage-like smell that we smell in this plant and in the sages. And thujone is neurotoxic. So we want to be really cautious when we have a plant that is rich in thujone as to how much we use, how we make medicine with it, and who we are working with that plant with, right? So if you have a robust nervous system and you want to just play with this plant short term, that's fine, that's great. And also, you know, you get to do whatever you want with your body. It's just you want to be aware of the potential concerns with anything that you're using internally. And with California mugwort, this is definitely the case. So one of the reasons why generally the mugwort that you see used in recipes is because if you smell the Artemisia vulgaris, it does not smell anywhere near that strong because the thujone content of vulgaris is significantly lower. So if you're using it internally, particularly if you're making a tincture and you're going to be using it long term, it's safer to use the vulgaris. This is one that is not really for use long-term or in large amounts internally, but in drop doses, in small amounts, and also topically, this is a great, great plant to work with. My app says it's Artemisia variegatum Lamont. Yeah, and so, oh, it's a variegated, yeah, that looked like Lamont is generally, sometimes will be in the quotes as a naming, as a varietal, as a cultivar. So yeah, but that kind of goes to show you there's a lot of different species of Artemisia, and because they are so beautiful, this actually brings up, Teresa, I'm glad you brought that up, this brings up another thing that we want to be mindful of when we're working with plants that are really beautiful, is oftentimes they are cultivated, and when we cultivate plants, then we're looking for a quality of it, and in your case, that variegation, right? Variegation is a color difference, so you'll see leaves that are white and green, right? That's called variegation. And so sometimes when they're selecting for that quality, the other chemistry of the plant, the actions of the plants may change. But if it's aromatic and smells and tastes great, then yeah, go ahead and use that. So what I want you to do, so we're going to just be aware that we're working with a plant that is what we call a low dose botanical. We use this in small doses when we're using it internally, and we're really mindful of the fact that this can cause some sensitivity and reactivity in some nervous systems if it's used for longer periods of time. And if you wanted to do this same recipe and have it safer, then you would look for a mugwort or an Artemisia that has a lower amount of those aromatics. It's likely to be useful. Yeah, Teresa, it's absolutely likely to be useful. Go out and smell it and taste it. It is certainly going to be safe. Now, if you tasted it and it was absolutely no aromatics, no flavor, no bitterness, then it may have been cultivated from a species that is commonly used just as a food, and so the medicine would be lower, or it may have had the medicine bred out of it. But try it and see, right? Use your organoleptic testing, test for the presence of those compounds. So take your leaf and taste a little bite of it. Little tiny bite. You already did.
It's very bitter.
Little tiny bite. It is very bitter.
A lot.
It is incredibly bitter. So this is the other thing about people using this mugwort to substitute for other mugworts in recipes, is if you have a recipe for a wound support tea, right, and it has vulgaris, the Artemisia vulgaris in it, and you think, oh, but I have this plant growing, I'm gonna harvest it and use it, your tea blend is gonna be just undrinkably bitter. Or if you wanted to replace it in a Korean soup recipe that has the Korean mugwort, which is very, very mild, and you put this in there, that would just make the soup inedible. So yeah, you do want to be kind of mindful of that. Thujone is poorly soluble in water. So if you make teas from plants that are rich in thujone, sages and mugworts and conifers, generally you're going to minimize the thujone extraction and they are safer to use. If you use a tincture, it's higher. And also, oh, and this is a big thing, a lot of people are interested in the use of mugwort as a smoking herb. If you are going to smoke mugwort, you really don't want to smoke the California native mugwort because that thujone is going to be really well absorbed in that smoking, and it's going to get right into the bloodstream. Doesn't even give the liver a chance to do some detoxification, right? We don't have when we take things in orally, at least the liver gets first pass to kind of go through and go, nope, you're not coming into the bloodstream. But if we're inhaling something, if we're smoking something, then it's going to go right through those alveolar sacs of the lungs into the bloodstream. And so you're going to get a really high amount of toxicity. So we do not use the California mugwort in concentrated smoking blends. You might use it in an incense blend, in a burning plants aromatically, that's fine, but concentrated as a smoke, we want to minimize that. It's bitter and aromatic. So yeah, yours is probably going to be very similar to this one. I would say if it's bitter and aromatic, think of it as as similar to this one. Yeah, there you go. All right. So, so the bitterness of mugwort then, what would you think that would be beneficial for? What do we use bitters?
Digestion.
Absolutely, digestion. This is a great digestive bitter. This is a really, really effective digestive bitter. And if we're using it as a digestive, then as a bitter, then we're using it in drop doses, right? So we don't have to worry so much about toxicity because you're just taking 1 or 2 drops. You do not need that much California mugwort. So this was harvested this morning. So I'm going to go through and garble this. So garbling is taking the usable part off of the less usable part. And this you can see that there's some older plant. We had some damage during the winter. And then we had, after the rains, we had all of this new growth. And so I've got this big flush of new growth of mugwort. So I went through and harvested it, but I'm not going to use leaves that are nibbled on or have discoloration, right? I want the leaves to be really, really beautiful, particularly since I have an abundance of this plant. I have a large patch of it, so I can afford to be a little bit more picky in which leaves I'm choosing for my medicine making. You might have only a little bit of a plant, and so you might be thinking, oh, you know what, we're just going to have to be okay with a little bit of some nibbles from a worm because there's just not that much, and that's fine. When you have little buds, you always want to kind of look inside the buds and see if there's any little inhabitants inside the bud, inside that new growth, because they like to be there, but there's none. And you want to look under the leaf, on the underside of the leaf, because sometimes you'll have insects that are living there, and there's none here. There are further down. So you'll just go through and just kind of assess all of your plants. Now this one, the stem is pretty soft and juicy. And so I'm going to put the tips, the stem tip, where it just breaks really, really easily. The stem is not likely to have a lot of the aromatics or the bitter compounds in it. But because this medicine is so strong, I don't mind diluting it a bit. In fact, I kind of like the idea of the stem kind of juices diluting it. So all of this is left over, and this is what I've kind of collected from it. So when you are harvesting, you're going to want to harvest a lot more than you think you're going to need, because by the time you process it, you have a smaller amount. So we have all of this is what I harvested from the garden this morning. Now, when we make a fresh plant tincture, you can do a folk method of just put the herbs and the tincture together, and herbs and the alcohol together, and go to town. With this plant, because you're using drop doses, that would be fine. But I figured this is a chance to do just kind of a quick introduction to a clinical strength fresh tincture. And I was just doing this with my students this weekend, so I thought this would be a fun thing to do with folks here, since I do still have a lot of mugwort. So fresh plant tincture is generally made in a 1-to-2 ratio. This is, we're making it in a weight to volume tincture. So for every 1 part by ounce of the herb, we're going to use 2 parts by volume, by weight and by volume. So 1 ounce of herb to 2 ounces of our menstruum. And we're going to use 95% alcohol, pure alcohol, because this is a very juicy plant. There's a lot of water in there, and that alcohol is going to draw the water and the constituents out of those cell walls and dilute it down considerably. When it's finished, the tincture will be probably right about 50 to 40% dilution. So it's not going to be 95% alcohol, which would be undrinkable generally when it's finished. So what that means, we're going to take I have a scale here, and we're going to weigh this.
I have a question about the alcohol.
Yeah.
Is that the same as isopropyl alcohol?
No. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So isopropyl alcohol is denatured. The alcohol has been, they add a compound to it to make it undrinkable, to make it poisonous, so that people wouldn't just go and buy it off in the pharmacy and drink it. You can make a tincture using isopropyl alcohol as a liniment to apply just topically. Absolutely, you can do that. And that is a way of getting a high proof alcohol to make a liniment that is inexpensive. The nice thing about the isopropyl alcohol is it's very, very inexpensive. The downside is you don't have the option with this to take it internally if you need it. The scent of isopropyl alcohol is very, very strong, and even though this is also very strong, it's you have that isopropyl alcohol scent, and those compounds that are added to it that are toxic. I mean, we use rubbing alcohol, we use isopropyl alcohol to stimulate circulation, to kind of open up the structure of the skin and enhance stuff moving into it. We use herbal liniments specifically because they're absorbed transdermally quite well. We're disrupting that waterproofing the external portion of our skin by using alcohol. And I want to use a really high quality alcohol, one that I would be okay drinking. So the one that we're using today, this is the alcohol that we're using today. This is 189.2 proof, but that's effectively 95%, 190. The proof is double the percentage, right? So 95%, you multiply that by 2 and you get 190. So this is 190 proof, which is effectively pure alcohol. So if you had 200 proof alcohol or 100%, that alcohol would be unstable. Alcohol is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture, draws moisture to itself, and we're using that as part of our medicine making, right? So it is hygroscopic. So alcohol draws moisture to itself. If this was 200 proof, 100% alcohol, then when we opened up this top, it would be, the alcohol in here would be drawing water from the atmosphere to itself, and it wouldn't be happy until it was relatively stable, until it had enough water to make it happy, which is right about 95%. So that's why generally when we're talking about pure alcohol, we talk about 190 proof or 95%. If you're ever wondering, why not go all the way up to 100? You know, they did, and this is just where it's stable. Sometimes you'll see alcohols that are sold as 200 proof. They're like, oh yeah, well we can go to 100. Well, it's not going to stay that way. The more you open that up, it's going to be, it's going to dilute itself. So this is pure alcohol. So we're going to have 1 to 2, 95%. So we measure this. The scale turned off. This is actually very easy to do. Much easier than making dried plant tinctures where you're kind of running around all over the place with the alcohol and you have to do math. Alrighty, so we have 145 grams of fresh plant here of the mugwort. So we're going to multiply that by 2. And I'm just going to say that is, well, it's 290, but I'm going to say it's 300 because it's easier to measure 300. So we're going to say 300 milliliters. If we're using grams to milliliters, that's the same as ounces to ounces. We're just using metric because metric, the math is easier. So 140 grams to 290 mils, we'll increase that that difference of 10 mils is basically 2 teaspoons full of alcohol, so it's a negligible amount. So that's effectively a 2-to-1 ratio of alcohol to plant material. And I'm going to use our blender to blend this up.
Did you get a new blender?
I did get a new blender. It's a NutriBullet. I am not a on NutriBullet's payroll, but boy, do I love their grinders. I have the little NutriBullets right over there. Those are my go-to in all my classes. They're solid. I've gone through so many grinders and blenders and all of that. NutriBullets just last. Okay, you're not gonna. There we go. Stop. They have these lovely little suction cups on the bottom, but every time you set it down. So we're going to put our mugwort in our blender. So that's 145 grams of mugwort. And then we're going to measure out 300 mils of our alcohol. So this alcohol, I get our alcohol. We always use organic cane alcohol for our tinctures that we make in here. But this is orange alcohol. This was distilled from orange juice. I'm just guessing they got a great deal on orange juice one time, and so they distilled it and used it. I have orange juice alcohol that I got from them, and I also got some lychee fruit alcohol. That's that 5-gallon kind of carboy down there. And if you want to smell this, you can actually smell a little bit of the citrus in here. I'll pass it around, you can smell it. Because in distillation, one of the things that can go over in distillation are those tiny little aromatic compounds, right? That's why we distill essential oils. And so while a lot of the stuff was left behind in distillation, a little bit of citrusy stuff in there. So I got a gallon of that because they figured, I think they just had a whole lot of the orange and the lychee fruit alcohol left, so they had a really big sale on it. So I got a great deal on 190 proof organic alcohol. But then I've just been keeping that around because it's like, okay, now what do you do with 190 proof spirit distilled from orange? Salt marsh caterpillars like mugwort. Oh, cool. Hi, Lori. Yeah. Isn't that lovely? It's so wonderful. So I can't use it in my official medicine making because I only use the cane, but I can do that. So this is a 2-to-1 ratio. There's 2 parts alcohol to the plant material. Now, one of the things that I want to show you is what that looks like in the container, because there's our alcohol and here's our plant material. And sometimes when we're making tinctures, we'll put the plant material into the container and then cover it with alcohol, right? So just fill it up until it's full of alcohol and then make your tincture. But even if we press this down like this in a proper 2-to-1 tincture, it is still there. If we covered it with alcohol, we would be adding that much alcohol. That is a difference of, say that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 cups. It's a difference of 3 cups of alcohol, 24 ounces of alcohol that would be just diluting the tincture, right? It would just be making it weaker. Now that's okay with a plant that is this strong, but if you're wanting something that is a clinical strength, it's a strong formula, weighing and measuring all of your parts is going to make sure that you have the correct concentration. After blending, it might need to be diluted a little bit in order to have the alcohol cover it, but you'll be amazed at how much fluid comes out of here. So we're going to blend this. It's going to be loud. If you have earplugs or headphones in, I would say to just be mindful of that. Things in theory, but they never actually work. It's like making pesto. All right, so now we can see we've ground that down and all of that plant material has gone down. You can see all of the liquid that was extracted when we broke that down. There was a lot of air in that compacted plant material. So we've pulled all of that out, we've broken all the cells. So we've broken those cell walls, and because alcohol is hygroscopic, the alcohol is now going into those broken cell walls and drawing out all of the water, all of the chemistry that was in that cell wall. So we're gonna let that sit. This is what tincturing requires, is what we call maceration. Maceration just means soaking. We're just gonna let it soak in there, give the alcohol its opportunity to extract that. Now, how long do we leave that in there is kind of depends on who you are talking to. The default, how long do you extract a tincture, is a month or a lunar cycle. Wow, okay. I also want you to experience what it's like when you open this up. So I'm gonna bring this around and you get a face full of, again, this is sort of like you were crushing that cell wall to inhale. Now we have a whole bucket full of that broken cell wall.
It's
But what
a little too
deep. It's, yeah. But what it doesn't smell like is alcohol, right? So if we had done that in the rubbing alcohol, there would be that really pungent, horrible rubbing alcohol smell. But this,
I didn't know they added chemicals to it. I didn't know the difference.
yeah. Oftentimes, and they don't tell you that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you that.
Yeah. Because it just says 95% alcohol. So
Right. So you're like, yeah, why would I pay $200 for that?
Well, you can tell it's not quite right.
Right.
It smells like a plastic bottle at like the pharmacy, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It's
All right.
such a bright green.
So that is another thing that I love about making a fresh plant tincture. The neon green color. I'm so glad you pointed that out. I'll bring this jar up. So I'm just putting it into a jar.
Is it the chlorophyll?
It is the chlorophyll, exactly. And so what we've done, we've gotten all that chlorophyll out there. I'm getting just a little bit that's stuck on the bottom. We've broken all those cell walls in chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is not very soluble in water. It is highly soluble in alcohol and highly soluble in oil, but it doesn't much like water. That's why you can make a nettle tea and it's not like bright, brilliant green, but a nettle tincture is. But yeah, so we broke that cell wall and we extracted that chlorophyll, and it is a neon green. This is a color that only herbalists who make fresh plant tinctures get to see, because this is not going to last in this color, because there's oxidation that has already started, right? We broke those cell walls, we pulled all of that out, and now there's all of that alcohol is in contact with all of that, and it's doing its job of pulling things out, but it's also damaging things and changing things. And so there will be some oxidation here. By tomorrow, it'll get a little bit darker brown. It'll still be a beautiful, beautiful green. It'll be a deeper green. But this neon green, you only see during the day that you extracted. So we're going to let that sit. Now you will see that the consistency of that is a little bit weird. It's going to go around the classroom and then I'll bring it back here. It looks like moss, yeah. Liquid measure by volume. Can you talk about those who measure the liquid by weight as well? I'm confused why the difference. So you can measure by weight. So there's an adage. that says a pint's a pound the world around. A pint, 16 ounces in volume, is a pound, 16 ounces in weight, the world around. And that is true for water, and it's pretty true for alcohol. It's not true for everything. For example, glycerin is significantly heavier a liquid. And so 16 ounces in volume of glycerin does not equal 16 ounces in weight of glycerin. So yeah, if you are measuring, like, in fact, Acadian, I would bet you are a soap maker, aren't you? Because soap makers are generally the ones who really love measurement by weight. It is more accurate. It's always more accurate to weigh something than to measure by volume, right? Because so many, well, and you can see why. This is exactly the reason why measurement by weight is more accurate, because all of that air in there made that look like a lot of plant material. But when we actually broke down all of those cells and got all of that air out, we can see the actual volume, right? So that is why we weighed the plant material, because there is that variability in the plant material. The liquid doesn't have that much variability except for things like glycerin. And so and with this, we are less concerned with the exactitude of something like soap making. So generally in soap making, you weigh all of the ingredients very carefully, because there is chemistry there. There's saponification, a reaction between the lye and the fatty acids, and it has to be exactly measured precisely so that you can control for that and not have extra lye left over, right? So in some recipes, the precision of weighing everything is really, really important. It's less here. But if you want to weigh all of your ingredients, absolutely you can. And so you would just weigh gram for gram, right? Or ounce for ounce, and that would be fine. Yes, and thanks for bringing it up. That's a really great question. Is there a way we can purchase the orange-based liqueur? You can see, the Organic Alcohol Company is where we get the alcohol. I only got 1 gallon of that one, Lori. If you want to come by and bring a little jar, I'll happily give you a little bit to play with. But all I have is that gallon of the orange that I got. This was Desiree went up and came back, and she grabbed alcohol for us, so we didn't have to pay for shipping on that one. But you might contact the company. I saw that they do occasionally have big sales on their organic alcohol, and I saw just recently they had another big sale on some of the artisanal alcohols that they extract from other, I assume maybe they just work with farms, and the farms say, we have this big crop, we don't know what to do with it, because you can distill alcohol out of anything that has sugar in it. So they can just take whatever. It's a great, it's a great business model. So yeah, those are the answers to the questions. Okay, so I wanted to show you, it looks sort of like moss, like a little container of moss. Now you do see that there is a little bit of plant material sticking out. Did you notice that? There's a little bit of plant material. It is not completely covered, right? Part of that is because we've been shaking around. We've been messing around with it. So it is suspended in the liquid. I'm going to let it sit until tonight or tomorrow morning, and then I'm going to check in with it. And what I expect is that the solids will compress down a little bit. The alcohol will continue to pull some of the liquid out, and it'll compress down. And by tomorrow or tonight, there should be a layer of liquid completely covering the plant material. If there isn't, then what I'm going to do is add more alcohol so that I get that cover, because we do want everything completely covered. But I don't know if that's necessary yet, because this is all shaken up. But mugwort, forgetting what plant we were using, mugwort is very fuzzy. It's a very, very fuzzy plant, and that's why it looks so gloppy, and so it takes up a lot more room than other plants. If we did exactly this same thing with lemon balm, then we would see immediately there would be a strong distinction between the plant material and the liquid. There would be a clear layer of that beautiful green liquid already on there. But mugwort is just a fuzzy plant. So we're going to let this sit for X amount of time because it's mugwort, and mugwort has an association with lunar energy, with the moon. You may want to let it sit for a lunar cycle. You may want to do all of this. You know, right now we're kind of in the middle of the lunar cycle, so you might want to do this at a new moon to new moon, or full moon to full moon, or new moon to full moon, right? So however you want to work with lunar energies, those all have kind of different energies that you'd want to draw down. That being said, I don't think you need to wait that long for a tincture to be done. This is a very juicy plant. We've just broken those cells and we're using a really strong solvent to extract things out. I would guess that this is going to be done well within a week, probably a couple of days. I could press this off and it will be pretty much as strong as it's going to be. So I could leave this for a month, for a couple of months until I'm ready to go, but I don't think it's needed. I think for most tinctures, it's not needed to wait a month. For many of them, a week to 2 weeks is probably going to be fine. But if you want to wait a month, sure. But also if you want to just like siphon some off, right? You're waiting for your tincture to be done. You're like, oh, but I want to try it now. You could certainly pull it off. So, I have little jars for you folks to take some home. So you'll take some of this home and take care of it and shake it every day and do whatever you want. If you want to put it out under the full moon and get some full moon energy with it, you absolutely can. And then you'll press it. You'll put it into some cloth and squeeze out all of the plant material. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. And so you'll have tincture. You'll probably have about 1 ounce I'm sorry, this is a 1 ounce. You'll probably have a half to 3/4 of an ounce of tincture from this. And so how will we use this? What do we do with tincture? Do we need to shake when it separates? Yes, so Ruth, that is, so with this, it's a good idea to shake your tinctures. Mostly because it keeps you kind of in relationship with your medicine as it's going, right? You can kind of check and see, is anything going on? Anything funky growing in there? Hi, how you doing? You can give it some love. You can, sing a little song, do some Reiki in it, whatever you do with your medicine making. Don't ever put crystals into your tinctures. I see people talking about that. And it's a stupid thing to do. Many of the minerals in a lot of different crystals are absolutely soluble and they will dissolve into your tincture. And unless you are really careful about using that only externally, even then you could have some serious toxicity there. So if you work with crystals, I can't really speak to how you do that, but don't put them inside next to. I had a crazy idea of making mugwort valerian. Hi, Mauricio. Were you thinking of California mugwort? So you do want to be cautious with the using it internally, but maybe just a tiny little bit of mugwort. So mugwort and valerian tincture. Valerian, what do we use valerian for? Sleep. Nervous system. It's a musculoskeletal relaxant and nervous system relaxant, and it is very, very strongly sedating. For many people, I'm a 1 in 20 paradoxical response to valerian person. And so valerian makes me jittery and irritable. I can't use valerian. But for most people, it's wonderful. And it's a great idea, Mauricio. Mugwort will potentiate other sedative plants. If you put just a little bit of mugwort into a sleep blend, it'll make that blend a little bit stronger. It just kind of wakes everyone up. Skullcap is another plant that does that. Just kind of makes everything work better with it. So you would want to, of course, be mindful of your dosage, especially if you were using this one because of the thujone content. We are using alcohol. We used high proof alcohol. So we've really got a lot of thujone in here. So little bits of it. It may be that the thujone's effects on the nervous system are why mugwort or one of the reasons why mugwort kind of stimulates that dream state, right? Having something kind of go in and go zzz to your nervous system might be, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know why we dream in the first place, and we don't know why herbs work on, why certain herbs work as oneirogens, facilitating that dream state. We just know that they do. So yeah, but dosing it so that you have mostly valerian, a little bit of that mugwort. I think that could be very, very fun for those people who love valerian. So we can use mugwort in drop doses internally right before bedtime as onogens, as plants that facilitate dream states. If we want to kind of play with that, that can be onogen. Boop. Erase our math. Onogen is a plant that facilitates dream states, increases dream states, and they generally tend to have different qualities. So onogens of note, we have blue lotus is one that's really common. Mauricio works a lot with blue lotus. Mugwort is probably the best known because it's so commonly used. Calea zacatecici, Mexican dream herb. Clip daga and clip daga are some of the common onogens. And so they all kind of have different qualities of dreams that often they will stimulate. Mugwort seems to be very much a sort of a teacher dream, right? The messages that you kind of need to get. Oftentimes people can find that the dreams that come with mugwort are not that kind of fun and happy and woohoo, we're going to dream state. They tend to be important, they tend to be meaningful, but those can also be hard dreams. Right? They can be kind of rough for some people, and sometimes you may be in a situation where you're not ready to do that work and you want to honor that. If you're not ready to, that is totally okay. We do work like that in our own time. But maybe that might not be, this might not be a plant that you want to engage with. If you just know that dreaming, or someone who has really strong vivid dreams, someone who has a lot of nightmares, if you're just not comfortable with going in and exploring that state, it may be that this is just a plant that you'll want to get to know in another way, maybe just using it topically, or maybe not using it at all, or combining it with other plants. So just like Mauricio was talking about combining it with valerian to increase its kind of its sedating effect, right? The valerian helps you to go to sleep, and then mugwort's like, oh, you're asleep now. Let's go through this door. You can also have plants that are helpful for building courage and strength, right? Say, I know that dreaming can be really difficult, but I feel like it's really important for me to do. You can combine with your mugwort something like motherwort. Right? Motherwort is a plant, Leonoris cardaica, translates to lion-hearted, right? Motherwort is a plant that strengthens our heart when we're doing something that needs to be done. It has that kind of, that benevolent celestial mother energy of holding us and saying, you know, you're strong enough to do what needs to be done. I've got your back. I am with you. You are not going into this alone. You can do this hard work. It's the energy of motherwort. So it's a great plant to use for someone who wants to work with mugwort but is concerned about that. That's a very good plant to use. Linden would be a lovely plant to use. Rose, lemon balm. Borage. Borage is a plant that is used for courage. Borage is an adrenal tonic and it strengthens us. Borage has long been associated with courage. So there's a lot of different ways that you could modify your formula. Is an onogen effect the same with the Artemisia families? So it depends. Mike, we were talking about how this is, how the Douglassiana, the species that we're working with right now, is considerably more aromatic and considerably more bitter than the vulgaris, the Artemisia vulgaris. And so there's different, we have we'll go back and watch the video. We talked about the mugworts versus the wormworts versus the sagebrushes. They all vary in their ratios of different things, but generally they're going to have aromatic compounds and they're going to have bitter compounds, and the ratios between those are going to differ. So just like Teresa did earlier, go and taste your mugwort and see what it has. If it has a lot of those aromatics, it's going to have a little bit more of an effect on the nervous system, on the dream state. It's going to be more strongly anti antifungal. That's another reason why we can use the tincture. This is a very strong antifungal. It's a very strong antimicrobial. Topically, it's really, really great for fungal infections like toenail funguses. It's very, very beneficial. It's going to be bright green. It's going to dye it green, but it will be really, really effective. If it's more bitter, then it's going to be likely have more of an effect on digestive function, on uterine function, on liver function. So that's another reason why we use mugwort. Why we would use this is that we have a moving effect, an energizing effect on the pelvic region, right? So it moves energy in the uterus. It's very helpful as an emmenagogue, a plant that stimulates uterine blood flow. So when periods are delayed or late, they're lighter, you're just wanting to like get stuff going, mugwort will quite often be used for that. It is therefore contraindicated in pregnancy. It's contraindicated if you're having very heavy menstrual flow already. You don't need to increase that, but sometimes we want to get that moving. Same thing, digestion. If we have kind of bloating and abdominal distension with our digestion, we can use a couple of drops of mugwort as a tincture taken internally, and that can really stimulate digestive secretions, digestive secretions in the stomach, and also stimulate bile production by the liver. So we're going to have increased digestion of fats and proteins. The nice thing about using mugwort for digestion is that it is also a very strong cytorestorative plant. It restores the health of cells. So damaged cells, when we bathe them with mugwort, we've seen a dramatic increase in the ability of cells to replicate and repair themselves. And so even though mugwort is very bitter, it is quite often used in very small amounts, again in drop doses, for people who have esophageal irritation from reflux, because it can go in and protect and soothe and heal that damaged esophageal tissue. It's really important that that gets healed, because that can become ulcerated. It can become scarred, and that scar tissue can have a negative impact on our digestive system, and you can get cancer. And there's a lot of serious qualities there. But mugwort can be added to teas for digestive purposes. This could be used in minute amounts for that purpose. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes.
Would it be beneficial like a couple days before your period if you get bloated and like?
It could be. It's a good thing to try and to see. So think of that energy of movement. Generally, for me, it feels good to have mugwort, because there is a feeling of stagnation. Like, you're just kind of right before. There's just this big bowling ball, and you're just like, just move stuff up. Exactly. Yes.
Would it be good? What would it be useful for combined with to just help that with the PMS symptoms, right?
With PMS symptoms,
Is it often used that way? Like combined?
it is often used. Generally more the Artemisia vulgaris, because you can use it in larger amounts. But you could use it with red clover. Red clover is a phytoestrogens. Phytoestrogens can bind with estrogen receptors and help to block excessive amounts of estrogen. A lot of PMS symptoms come from estrogen dominance situations, where there's too much estrogen in that second part of the cycle, where there should not be estrogen. We should be progesterone dominant at that time, but the estrogen levels never really drop. So there's a larger question as to why they aren't. Oftentimes because of liver dysfunction, because of exposure to estrogenic agents. But we can use the plant estrogens because they are much milder in their estrogenic effect, but they bind with the same receptors, the estrogen receptors. So the net effect, even though they are estrogenic, the net effect is a drop in estrogen. So, and then red clover is like super nourishing and wonderful and mineral rich and all of that. And so it's really lovely. So that would be a good combination. Dandelion root for liver support, right? The liver's job is to clear excess estrogen out of the body. So you have a 1-2 punch of block the estrogen and then open up the door to get the estrogen out of there. So that would be a nice combo. Mugwort and red clover and dandelion root. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So we could use it for For dream states, we could use it for digestion. You can use just a drop or two right before meals as a bitter agent to stimulate secretion of digestive enzymes and improve digestion. It is a very, very effective digestive bitter. Mugwort is just amazing that way. So you can try that. You can use it topically, as we said, for fungal infections, but you can also, so the aromatic artemisias, so Mike, this is another, way, and Teresa, this is another way to use aromatic artemisias. The aromatic compounds in artemisias topically are very good anodynes. They are pain relievers. And so there's a traditional remedy, a traditional chumash remedy that uses Artemisia californica, California sagebrush, extracted and applied topically. But the aromatic artemisias, the Douglassiana, is so aromatic. The chemistry is very, very similar to the California sagebrush, and so you can use that topically too, just rubbed onto areas of nerve pain or muscle pain. Very, very effective. It is going to, you'd want to dilute it because this one is very strong and it's going to be, again, kind of painting you green wherever you apply it. So you could dilute that down a little bit. In Chinese herbalism, we talk about the artemisias as being blood moving. They move blood, and the concept of blood moving is a common concept in TCM concepts of pain relief, kind of going to that concept that we were talking about of stagnation, right? You have stagnation that presses, that's pressure against nerves, that's pressure against sensitive tissues, and that is one of the root causes of pain. If you can just kind of break up that stagnation, get energies flowing, get blood flowing, get lymph flowing, get kind of movement through there, get energies flowing through the meridians of the body. This is another kind of cool thing. Mugworts are what are used in the making of moxie sticks. If you've ever had an acupuncture treatment, right, have needles stuck in you, sometimes what acupuncturists will do along with the needles is that they will bring a little tube of rolled plant material, and it's mugwort. It's a particular type of mugwort, a particular species, and it's dried. And because mugwort is so fuzzy, we can see these hairs in here. The presence of those hairs is why this kind of process uses mugwort. It has those aromatic compounds and it has that fuzz. So when they dry it and they roll it into a little cigar shape, they can light that, and then they apply that to the needles or close to the area where the needle is inserted, because artemisias break up stagnation, and generally when they're needling an area, it's because they are looking to break up stagnation, break up blocks in there, and help to disperse this. So just this increases the efficacy of acupuncture, and it's quite often used instead of acupuncture. But you kind of get that same energy from using the tincture topically. So a lot of different reasons why we can use this tincture, sometimes some of them internal, some of them topical. If you have a artemisia around you that you want to use with this, you absolutely could. And this is also just the basic concept, the basic process of making any fresh plant into a tincture. So you can apply this to whatever fresh plant you have, and this is how an herbalist makes a tincture from that fresh plant. So there you go. We'll let this sit. We'll process this into jars for you. You'll let it sit for about a week and however long after that. And then you'll press that out, put it into a little dropper bottle, and use it. So try to mix with arnica. Yeah, you absolutely could mix it with arnica. It would be great to use mixed with arnica topically. Yeah, topically, exactly. Yeah, I think that people don't use tinctures as liniments nearly often enough, and tinctures are awesome for liniments for topical usage. So go play with some mugwort, try making a tincture, and let me know how you do with it. See you later. Bye-bye.